Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. Our first Top Cut breakdown in months. Man, am I so excited to be back here talking about the meta. We're finally getting some more premier events, both online and IRL, so I'm pretty excited to talk about them here. In today's video, we're talking about both the Virginia Beach tournament and the PPG online premier event. I did want to talk about the Gamers Florida Case tournament as well in this video, but it's already Tuesday. I want to get this info out to you guys ASAP because it's still fresh in our brains and still relevant. And unfortunately, I couldn't get the data in time. So in today's video, we're talking about those two tournaments. You guys might notice the new setup here. That is all thanks to you guys, by the way. Thank you so much. I'm going to talk about this more in a future video. It's actually going to be one for the Dragon Ball Super community as well as the Crossworld community. So make sure you stay tuned for that, guys. You're not going to want to miss it. That being said, guys, if you are new here, make sure to subscribe. Hit that bell so you don't miss a video. If you want to help the channel out, there are many links in the description down below that will help us out. If you want to buy the cards you see in today's video, use our link to TCG Player. If you guys want to get caught up on some competitive content as well as some one-on-one coaching, check out the Patreon, check out the Gemmy app, and definitely, guys, use the link in the description below to Dex Protection if you need any sleeves, deck boxes, card storage, stuff like that. That being said, guys, let's jump right into this. So we're going to treat it like a top 16, even though it was two separate top 8s. I'm just going to lump it together. We're going to talk about it as a top 16, and we will also talk about it as individual metas, because honestly, the VA meta and the PPG meta, they're pretty different, and it's actually really interesting. So overall, we had 4 Dredge Gokus, we had 3 Gotenks, 2 Shinchonron, 2 Vegex, 2 Vegito, 1 Skilless, 1 Zamasu, and 1 Invoker. Now, before I get into the breakdown, splitting up the two different formats, what's really interesting about this is that there was no hyper aggression in this format from the looks of it. I mean, I'm sure they were in Swiss, I'm sure they were in the room, but none of the super hyper aggressive decks made it to the top cut in either tournament. And to me, that's really interesting. I honestly was really expecting to see a decent amount of Reboot Gohan and a decent amount of Mono Black Buu, but I was really expecting to see the Reboot Gohan more so in this format, because like I've talked about before, it's really hard to deal with leader based aggression. You know, the only real deck that can deal with that is yellow with Zamasu Super Combo and with Release from Evil. But when you don't have those cards in your deck, it honestly is a lot more difficult to deal with that leader based aggression. But that deck just didn't seem to make it into this top cut. It's actually really interesting. So this is more of a format dominated by mid-range and control. So that being the case, I also want to give a shout out to Mono Green Frieza. Doesn't seem like that deck was in the format either. I do think that's a very strong deck, don't get me wrong, but I actually think the lack of tournament pack promos is a big reason why we didn't see Mono Green Frieza in this top cut. I think that deck really does need the Zarbon blocker to be a lot more powerful. So with that being the case here, I wanted to just say that I think that's the reason why Mono Green Frieza wasn't necessarily in this top cut. But besides that, let's start breaking it down. So we had 4 Dredge Goku. This was a 2-2 split between the PPG event and the VA event. I definitely was not expecting Dredge Goku to be the most dominant deck in the format. And when I say most dominant deck, it definitely wasn't by a large mile. I mean, it had the most representation in this quote-unquote top 16. But I still did not expect it to be at top of the format, which is really interesting. I mean, the deck is just board wipe deck from the looks of it, and a lot of the times you're not even using your leader effect to board wipe. That's how the good Dredge Goku players are going to play it, but that's also the good opponents making you play that way. And what I mean by that is your opponent's not going to go all out on the board and force your board wipe effect from your leader, because yeah, while you are critting 2 life, yeah, that can be important, but most of the time in Dredge Goku, you're awakening turn 1, you have 8 life to play with. So even critting those first 2 or 4 life isn't the biggest problem in the world. So as the opponent, you're probably realizing that, especially if you're making it to the top cut of this event. So you're not putting too much into the board. It's kind of hard to put too much into the board because of Dredge Goku's effect. It's kind of like that threat of it being there. You know, you might not use the Dredge Goku effect all the time, but the threat of it being there is enough to make you play a certain way, and those types of decks are usually very powerful in the format. Gotenks is kind of the same way, where it kind of makes your opponent not want to willy-nilly use extra cards. They don't want to use negates all the time. They don't want to use their other extra cards to gain advantages, because if they do, you know, you're basically getting free advantage. But besides that, Dredge Goku not having to use its life to board wipe is going to give it a longer game. It's going to add some longevity to the Dredge Goku game. And with that being said, once you get to turn 5 and later, which will happen a lot, because once again, not a lot of aggression in the format, mostly mid-range, mostly control. Once you get to turn 5 and beyond, you have rebrand. Just play it, board wipe, play it, board wipe. It's honestly pretty insane once you get to a super late game. I do think Dredge Goku would have struggled a bit more if there was more aggro in the format, but I'm not going to say I'm the best Dredge Goku player by any means. So that being the case, if you know more about that, leave it in the comments below how you think Dredge Goku would fare in a more aggressive format. But I think because of the lack of the aggression, I think that's why Dredge Goku was able to take the biggest amount of slots in this top cut. Next up, we're talking about Gotenks. Gotenks was only in the top cut of Virginia Beach, not in the top cut of PPG, and I think that's really interesting. I think that, you know, obviously when Vegeks was at full power, I mean, this probably would have been a much less diverse top cut. We had 8 different decks in this top 16, which is very diverse. But if Vegeks was still at full power, I think this would have been a much smaller, maybe 3-4 decks if we were lucky. With that being said, though, I think when Vegeks was at full power, I think Gotenks was definitely a deck that people thought was more rogue. Like, yeah, it's kind of a coverall. Yeah, you can play any strategy you want in Gotenks, but it can't quite compare to Vegeks. But now that Vegeks is the fairer deck that it is, I think Gotenks is the deck that people were still kind of sleeping on, but it's pretty cool to see it show up here. All these Gotenks builds were mono yellow, by the way, and I'm kind of surprised by that. I really thought that blue yellow and red yellow Gotenks would show up a bit here, but I think as the format evolves and develops, I think more and more people will experiment with different builds of Gotenks, because it is really that cover all type of leader. You have Gotenks, you have Jiren. They're super generic leaders, just and really strong for their effects that they have. So that being the case, I think more builds of Gotenks will start to pop up, but it's still really cool nonetheless to see mono yellow Gotenks making 3 slots in the VA top cut. Probably a deck I'm going to be playing going forward, so stay tuned for that. Next up, we had 2 Sin Shenron, once again only at Virginia Beach, not shown in the PPG top cut. Sin Shenron's really interesting because I really didn't think that it would be one of those decks that's going to be a super dominating force in the meta, but I think it really benefited from this top cut because of the lack of hyper aggression. Without decks like Reboot Gohan, without decks like Boo, I think Sin Shenron was able to really shine here, because Sin Shenron has one of the best late games in the game. Getting to turn 6 and beyond, tapping 6, bringing back all your Shadow Dragons, that's pretty unrivaled value, especially when you're bringing back the revenge blockers. That is very strong. I think the thing is, though, again, with the lack of hyper aggression, nothing was able to pressure Sin Shenron super early, so they were pretty much able to get to their late game relatively easily. And with that being the case, I mean, when you're tapping 6, bringing back a whole board of a bunch of dudes, that is definitely going to be pretty strong. Next up, talking about Vegeks. No Vegeks in the VA top cut. We did have 2 Vegeks in the PPG top cut, though, one of which was a Vegeks Boo, so that's one of our more aggressive decks of the format. Really, I would say the only hyper aggressive deck of the format, if you even want to call it hyper aggressive. The other Vegeks build was a Union Fusion mid-range focused build, and like I said before, guys, I still think that Vegeks is very strong in the format. Obviously not dominating the whole format, no one's really expecting that with the nerfs. But with that being the case, it's really cool to see Vegeks still in the top cut. And it's even cool to see like the diversity of Vegeks. You know, one being a Vegeks Boo, one being a Vegeks mid-range. Cool to see the diversity there. I think the problem with Vegeks is, though, like in this super late game style meta that we see here, you don't really have a ton of great counterplays. You don't really have any great counterplays. I mean, yeah, there's Dabura. Dabura's pretty cool. He can stop activate mains, but he doesn't stop interplay autos, and he doesn't actually prevent things from getting played. So I think that is a problem that Vegeks is going to have to figure out a solution to. I mean, even in testing Vegeks myself, I'm a big fan of the deck, but it definitely has its issues. It struggles a lot with wide aggression, and you can play Protector of the People, but honestly, Power Burst feels really good in the deck. Not even a Scratch feels really good in the deck. So having to play Protector of the People, discard additional cards, that definitely can hurt. I mean, of course, you're playing it in your side deck, but having to potentially main deck it, that seems like it can definitely hurt. So I wanted to throw that out there. Next up, we're talking about the 2 Vegetos, one of each actually, one at Virginia Beach, one at PPG. The one at Virginia Beach was a mono blue Vegeta. Shout out to my patron Sean for making this top cut with his mono blue Vegeta deck, and it's really cool to see. Another deck I'm a really big fan of, and another deck that I think definitely benefits from a lack of hyper aggression in the format. As mono blue, you have answers to just about everything. I mean, Trunks pretty much hits everything outside of Deflect, which is obviously very strong. Ramping to a turn 3 Obuni is one of the best plays in the format, I would argue, so that's very powerful. And I want to shout out Eggman for his good finish at the PPG event, playing his Vegito Revive deck. Very cool, innovative build. I don't think anyone's really looking at that besides Eggman, so to see that, you know, I think he got 2nd place of the tournament. To see that get so far in the tournament, that's really cool. And again, I think that is very beneficial to the fact that there was no hyper aggression in the format. All the Revive cards, they, you know, they're a little bit more late game, especially the Angel Destruction rare. It's a really good card, but it's definitely super late game. So being able to get there and play it and then stabilize off of that, just constantly KO, bring it back, KO, bring it back, that's going to be a very, very good setup for the long game. And again, it seems like this format was very, very long game oriented, which honestly is pretty cool. I don't want to see like a turn 2, turn 3 format. You know, thank you again, Bandai, for hitting the U3 cards. That being said, moving down the list, one Skillous. I'm super happy to see this. I mean, this is one of the decks that can teeter the line between aggro and mid-range, but it's definitely not hyper aggression. It's not Boo levels of aggression. It's not Reboot Gohan levels of aggression. So that being the case, I'm always happy to see Skillous in a top cut. I'm super excited to play it. This was a Yamcha Skillous build, so from the looks of it, it was basically red black, and when your red battle cards would die by skills, you could play Bunny Girl Bulma, bring back the Desert Hyena, and he's a really strong card. I mean, once per turn he can't be negated, you restand him, and if he KOs a battle card, he gains the triple strike, and it's just really good for finishing power, and it's hard to deal with. So very good in that sense. We had one Zamasu. I put this leader in a more rogue slot, and I do think that's still pretty accurate. You know, I don't think one spot at top 16 makes it a meta dominating deck, but I am pretty interesting to know whether this was a Tragedy Overground build or more of a Unison Slayer build. I think personally Unison Slayer build's pretty solid. You know, if your leader says dual attack, double strike, draw 2 cards every turn, you know, turn 2 and beyond, that's really strong. So I think that's personally the better build. But then again, in a late game format like this, the Tragedy Overground build can definitely be solid, although I think you will run into problems because some of the counterplays, especially like Trunks God Stealing Technique, he is going to give you a problem if you're playing the Tragedy Overground build. He's just not going to allow you to play your Zamasu. So with that being the case, I do want to know which Zamasu build that was. If you know more, definitely drop a comment down below. And finally, guys, one Invoker. Now this is something I definitely wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting to only see one Invoker in the format, and it's really interesting because there wasn't a lot of aggression in the format. So that being the case, you would think Invoker would shine a lot more. Now, as far as I'm aware, Invoker did a lot better at the Gamers event, so that definitely, you know, can be the case. The Gamers event may have been very, very different from these two tournaments that we're seeing right here, but either way, with the lack of aggression, I would have expected Invoker to do a lot more. But with that being the case, I think a lot of players were prepared for Invoker. I think a lot of people talked about Invoker leading up to the weekend, and most decks have answers to the Rival Seeker. I mean, most of the extra card counterplays hit Rival Seeker. You know, you might want to also have answers to Victory Strike in your deck, which, well, you know, a hard negate can do. And that's actually an interesting comment I saw over the course of the weekend. Dormant Potential Unleashed actually not being a great card in the green decks, specifically Dredge Goku, because of the lack of aggression. So that being the case, you might want to pivot, play some hard negates like Shocking Death Ball or things like that to deal with the Victory Strike. And then as long as you have your answers to the Rival Seeker, you won't get burned for game as easily. That does help out a lot. But guys, overall, a very interesting meta breakdown here. I want to know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm very excited to be back doing these things. Very excited for the new camera setup. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I will see you guys next time.